Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to bring forward this rule on behalf of the Rules Committee. The rule provides for consideration of H.Res. 11 and a resolution regarding the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334. It provides for 1 hour of debate on H.Res. 11, equally divided between the chairman and ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Additionally, this rule provides for consideration of legislation that I introduced, H.R. 26, the Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny, or REINS Act. It makes in order 12 amendments from members of both sides of the aisle and provides for 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader. Yesterday, the Rules Committee received testimony from the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of this new Congress is a time of hope and a time to establish clear priorities and goals. This is a time to show the American people that we, as their elected representatives, will have the courage to stand on principles that made us worthy of their trust. This rule provides for 2 pieces of legislation that represent the commitment and our commitment to the integrity and transparency of this institution. H.Res. 11, introduced by Chairman Royce and co-sponsored by Ranking Member Engel, objects to United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 as an obstacle to Israeli-Palestinian peace. It calls for the resolution's repeal and makes clear that the current administration's failure to veto the UN resolution violated long-standing U.S. policy to protect Israel from such counterproductive UN resolutions. Importantly, it also provides a foundation for the next administration to take action to counteract the damaging effects of the UN Security Council resolution. Mr. Speaker, I support H.Res. 11, and yet it shouldn't be necessary. President Obama's refusal to veto the UN Security Council's resolution was a radical and dangerous departure from U.S. precedent. Prior to this most recent Security Council resolution, President Obama had exercised the veto power of the United States on every resolution relating to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His failure to do so at this time jeopardizes and undermines our relationship with our strongest ally in the Middle East, and it has the potential to undercut the peace process. I have stood in this chamber numerous times before and demanded support for Israel, and I'm going to do so here again today. I refuse to sit idly by and watch a misguided anti-Israel policies take root. We have to take a stand. The administration's failure to act, to even participate in the vote, was an act of cowardice. It can't be erased, and we must take steps to address it. This resolution is a step in the right direction. As the new president is sworn in this month, I am hopeful that we, as a House of Representatives and the United States, will reaffirm our support for Israel and return to the policies that strengthen the relationships between our 2 nations. But, Mr. Speaker, also as the new Congress starts, we must look at domestic policies and how to grow our economy. We are going to right here in the House by taking the lead on regulatory reform to help lift the burden of an intrusive government while jump-starting the economy. As part of this effort, I introduced H.R. 26, the REINS Act. This bill was originally authored and introduced by former Congressman Jeff Davis in 2009, and last Congress and before introduced by now Senator Todd Young, introduced in the House. This Congress, I am proud to carry the torch for this common sense legislation, and I also want to thank Chairman Goodlatte and his staff for all their hard work on this bill. Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution grants legislative powers to Congress. We read about that right here on the floor this morning. But for too long, Congress has ceded that power to the executive branch, resulting in an onslaught of regulation. This is a problem that we have seen under administrations of both parties, and members on both sides of the aisle should be concerned. In recent years, the problem has exploded. In 2015 alone, the executive branch issued over 3,000 rules and regulations. 76 of these regulations were major regulations. Let me explain that. Unelected bureaucrats, without input from the American people or their representatives in Congress, issued 76 major regulations that would impact our economy by more than $100 million each in 1 year alone. The consequences of these rules are massive, and even worse, we have seen this administration promote regulations with burdens that far outweigh their benefits. The REINS Act would require federal agencies to submit a major rule to Congress for approval. Under this bill, major rules would have to be accepted by both chambers and signed by the President to become effective. This bill restores accountability to the legislative process and ensures that lawmakers, not nameless bureaucrats, are the ones making laws just like our Constitution outlines. We have seen the harm that can come from an out-of-control regulatory regime. Right now, hardworking Americans across the country are paying the price. In fact, on average, each U.S. household is bearing the annual economic weight of $15,000 in regulatory burden. The oppressive cost of regulation, coupled with impact on jobs, demand action. One regulation put forth by the Environmental Protection Agency in 2015 would cost the home state of Georgia over 11,000 jobs. And we're familiar with the Waters of the USA rule, which essentially asserted authority over all groundwater in the country. If you've been to Northeast Georgia, you know that water collects in pool and puddles and streams at certain times of the year. If all that were to be regulated under this rule, it would be a disaster for not only my district, but all the country. But that's what this administration has tried to do. That rule would have has been halted by a court, but were it to go into effect, it would cut farmers, ranchers, realtors, and small businesses off at the knees. With the number of major rules this administration propagated, I could far exceed my time just illustrating the examples. But with the REINS Act, we have a chance to carve a better way going forward. The American people elected us in this body to represent them. The REINS Act allows their voice to be heard more clearly. And again, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter what party in the executive branch, the legislative branch is the one that makes and sets the bills, not the unelected bureaucrats. So with that bill, it creates a sensible way to move forward with legislative business while better protecting our economy from suffocating regulations that Americans never voted to enact. With that, I reserve the balance.